See if that made things any better. Oh, I think we're rocking and rolling now, Mike.
Yeah, I saw some pop
Very
up.
okay, wonderful. All right. Yes, perfect. Maybe. Think. Oh, dismiss. Are we up and running here? Oh, I think we're rocking and rolling, folks. Okay. It took a couple minutes there to get the technical stuff sorted out, but Hoosier Nation, you got good news once again. And look, Indiana had a strong ending to the regular season. They had a strong Big Ten conference tournament. The NCAA tournament included a victory over Wyoming in the first four. And now your Indiana Hoosiers next year will start as a preseason top 25 team after star big man Trayce Jackson-Davis announced on social media earlier on Friday that he is back. He channeled his Michael Jordan from the mid 90s. The end of his announcement video was literally the quote, "I'm back." And well, now the Hoosiers will be tabbed as one of the best teams in the Big Ten going into this upcoming season. We're going to dive into how much this means for the Hoosiers program. What should expectations be? How realistic should they be? Is Indiana going to go undefeated? We're going to dive into that and so much more here on episode 253 of the Hoosiers Sound Radio, the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We are recording this edition of the Hoosiers Sound on Friday, May 20th, 2022, where I am your host, Nathan Krishnan. Here with me tonight is special guest, our business and legal contributor, Mike Pudlow. You've seen Mike on our podcast before talking about NIL and other legal things. In fact, he joined less than a year ago when NIL became a thing. Mike is a huge IU basketball expert, one of our main contributors on IndianaHQ.com. Mike, I know you've watched every game that Trayce Jackson-Davis has played in his IU basketball career. How excited should IU fans be? How surprised are you that he did announce his return to the Hoosiers?
Well, first off, Indiana's back, right? Are we officially back? I mean, last year was a good stepping stone, but I think, this season is a year where we really want things to take off under the Mike Woodson era. We've got his style of players coming in, new recruiting class, but really, obviously in college basketball, you need that cornerstone superstar. And now we have Trayce Jackson-Davis returning. It's a huge moment for the Hoosiers. It's always good when you have a cornerstone player that the fans could hold on to and cheer for, especially when they're really good, like TJD is. And so, yeah, it's definitely an exciting time. I think fans should be excited. They should be ready. And as far as, am I surprised? I would say no. I mean, I think there was about a 50-50 chance of him returning or moving on to the NBA. Obviously, he tested the waters. And I think that was a smart move. It's always good to test it out, see what the coaches or scouts, agents are saying. And that's an important thing. Now we can take that info, come back to college and be better. And I think it was kind of a questionable whether he would be a second round pick or not, maybe go undrafted. So, this way he could come back, improve on some things and prepare for hopefully another great season and maybe better draft stock moving forward.
Absolutely. And we're going to dive into some of those things that Trayce Jackson-Davis could potentially perfect, get better at. That was our podcast poll that was laid out there earlier today on the Hoosier Sound Twitter account. Go vote if you haven't voted already. We're going to touch on that a little bit later on in this episode. But Jackson-Davis, per school release, did have a statement after announcing his return to the Hoosiers. And he said, "The opportunity I had to work on my game for the professional level was something that was invaluable as I continue my growth as a basketball player. However, I am looking forward to returning to Indiana to be with my coaches and teammates and build off of what we accomplished at the end of the season. There are goals I have for our team and for myself individually on the court, But at the end of next year, more importantly, I will be proud to say I am a graduate of IU. And it's his 4th season coming back to the Hoosiers. Jackson-Davis right now sits 15th all-time in scoring in program history at 1,565 points. He's 9th all-time in rebounds, 7th all-time in block shots. And Mike, as I look at this, one of the concepts that I think we lose track of, and sometimes players and families and coaches lose track of as they think about NBA draft or returning to college, is the upside of making a major splash, making your legacy, telling your full story at, it could be a prominent basketball program like Indiana or North Carolina or Kansas or Kentucky, all the way to the other side of being that legend at a mid-major school. And Trayce Jackson-Davis, with a strong season, can absolutely vault into legend status, especially when you compare him to modern day Hoosiers post Bob Knight. You think about how excited everyone is in Bloomington or in Hoosier Nation when you bring up the name Yogi Ferrell or you bring up the name Victor Oladipo. Trayce Jackson-Davis, with a great season, with a season like he's had the last 2 years, can absolutely get to that level, if not even greater. Jackson-Davis, again, almost 1,600 career points. It is completely conceivable that he vaults into the 3rd spot as far as Hoosiers all-time scoring is concerned when his 4th season is done. I thought it was interesting that Indiana University did point out that Jackson-Davis does have 2 years of eligibility left if he wants to use it. I would be stunned. I would be stunned if he returned for a 5th year in 2023-24. But anyway, I thought it was interesting that the school pointed that out. The thing is, Jackson-Davis was originally slated to participate in this week's NBA Combine in Chicago. The tough break for him is that in the days leading up to the Combine, multiple reports are that Jackson-Davis tested positive for COVID-19. I believe inside the hall headed first, tested positive for COVID-19, and that took him out of the 5-on-5 scrimmages and just that whole immersive experience at the NBA Combine. Now, Mike, you did see Jackson-Davis train with Arizona's Dalen Terry, UCLA's Peyton Watson, LSU's Tari Eason, and some footage from that session did show him stretching the floor, developing that jump shot. Is the jump shot the main piece missing right now for Jackson-Davis, whether you look at his contribution to Indiana this upcoming season or the NBA down the road?
I think that's definitely one of them. I think there's 2 real big factors that are important for him to improve on. I think offensive versatility, whether that's a little jump shot, even if it's 12, 15 feet, or a hook shot, or a consistent float, or just something that he can add another tool in his bag to improve his offensive output. He's been relatively consistent, as it goes offensively, but you want to see him expand. The problem with him also is he's a bit positionless, right? We don't know exactly in the NBA where is he going to be. So improving that offensive versatility. But I think the other big factor that I think goes a little under talked about a little bit is his defensive versatility on multiple positions. We know he can block shots. He averages over 2 block shots a game. He's great in the post, but I want to see him do a little bit more switching onto different players. Can he guard both 5s, 4s, 3s, 2s? How can he improve his defensive versatility and show that at the next level that no matter where you put him, he's going to be successful? And I think that's a really important thing. I mean, if you look at, for example, let's take a comp like Baylor's Jeremy Sohan, right? He's projected to be a 1st-round pick. You look at him, he's basically the same size as Trayce Jackson-Davis. I think TJD is maybe about 10, 15 pounds heavier. And if you look at the numbers, Davis has better numbers all around, better field goal percentage, better points, better rebounding, better assists. But the thing is, we know what Sohan is at the next level. He's a proven commodity on defense. We know where he slots in. because of his athleticism. And the thing with TJD is we need to see more of him kind of projecting those skills so that we know going to the next level what exactly he's going to be. It's not always about how many things you can do, but having a projected path for NBA teams to see, okay, this is where he's going to play, this is what I'm going to get. And having that consistency and that kind of definite nature is really important. And I'll tell you, one time I was talking to Bryce Group, former Valparaiso, Vanderbilt head coach, currently at Grand Canyon, played several years in the NBA. And I remember he was telling me the most important part about going to the NBA is having a role. It doesn't matter how versatile you are, how many different things you can do. What's really important is, are you a shooter, a rebounder, a defender? Do you have that specified role that NBA teams can latch onto? And I think that's really another factor we need to see is, for Davis is just kind of continuing to show new things, that he can do and show that he can be a 3 or a 4 or wherever you need him to be in the NBA. But I think the good thing for him is we're seeing NBA teams are going smaller and smaller. And so that definitely benefits him moving forward. So we just need to see that jump shot, more offensive moves, and the continuation of defensive progression. And I think he'll be in good shape.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting story to see play out here over the next year. Of course, playing in the pros will be on Jackson Davis's mind. Of course, there have been comments from analysts like Andy Katz that with a great upcoming season at Indiana, Jackson Davis could play his way into National Player of the Year consideration, and he could play his way into the first round. And that's when you really start getting excited if you're a prospect as far as the contracts and the guarantees. That should be on the front and center of Jackson Davis's mind going into next year. Hoosier fans, though, look, the expectations for the 2022-23 season will be higher than any preseason in the last handful of years. Even going back into the Archie Miller era, I would say pretty much equating this year to what we had before the Romeo Langford season. This year's probably more optimism and more excitement and more energy. And of course, I know it sucks, but there are 6 whole months left before really the first ball is tipped on opening night. But Mike, after Jackson Davis announced that he will return to the Hoosiers, analyst John Rothstein had Indiana 17th in his new preseason top 25 that he updates for news and decisions and declarations. Andy Katz, BTN, had the Hoosiers pegged as the #1 team in his Big Ten power rankings at the moment, narrowly edging out schools like Michigan and Michigan State. How about Dave Revson, host on Big Ten Network, commentator on Big Ten Network? He said on social media that he has Indiana competing for a Big Ten regular season title. Not necessarily the outstanding favorite, not head and shoulders above the league, but in that top tier mix as far as teams that have a chance. Mike, as you look at this team now going forward, let's call a spade here. Indiana has not been ranked in the preseason top 25 since January 2019. So as you look at this current situation, Matt, do you think that the Indiana Hoosiers, with Trayce Jackson-Davis and Race Thompson and Xavier Johnson and Miller Kopp back, can match that level? Do you think it's fair to put them in the preseason top 25? And do you think they can sustain that next year?
Well, it's a really interesting question. And I think I'll refer to fellow Indiana HQ contributor Cody Thompson, who said, IU has the talent, but we don't have a comfort level at being good yet. We're not consistently up to that level. We were good last year. We've had years in the past, but we're not like a Wisconsin or a Michigan State or even an Ohio State that's been able to repeat year after year after year, and players kind of have an understanding across the board of what it takes to be at that level. I think we'd started to develop it last year. And I think going into this year, it's another evolution. But the thing is, it's tricky to say, okay, we're going to be the number one overall in the Big Ten without that type of consistency and experience being good. But that doesn't mean it can't happen, because we have the talent. We have a coach who's, proven at the NBA level, seemed to do some good things in college. But, it seems like we have a pretty good level of trust in Coach Woodson, obviously an IU legend. And we have the talent. We have a nice recruiting class coming in, a nice group of returning players, as you said. So I think, is it reasonable to say we'll be the number one team? Yes, I think it is. I'm not sure if it's, I kind of am fearful that there might be a little too much overhyping too soon, for the preseason. But if you're telling me at the end of the year, we'd be number one in the Big Ten, no, that doesn't surprise me at all. I think it's entirely plausible based on what we have. And I think the leadership that Jackson-Davis provides, you see that hunger, that competitiveness, him returning to IU, and if, going back to what you said earlier about him being a legend in Bloomington, going back, if you read articles when he committed to IU, he talked about being a fan, wanting to wear the red and the green and crimson, wanting to be a legend. He has that desire. He loves the program. He's someone who grew up within the IU spectrum, in Indiana. And so he wants to take that baton and carry it forward. And I think that's a really positive sign for what the potential is that the team could be.
And that's everything, isn't it? I mean, this is what Hoosier fans have been dying for so long, whether it's sort of the end of the Tom Crean era or through the Archie Miller era. Hey, number one request, have guys on your team that want to be here, want to play for the name on the front of the uniform. And Trayce Jackson-Davis has indicated time and time again that he fits in that mold. And that's exactly what is exciting Hoosier fans going into this upcoming season. Mike, there's no doubt in my mind that Indiana can achieve these goals that are being seemingly set upon them going into this upcoming season. It starts with the conversations that I had as an Indiana HQ reporter in the locker room with other journalists, with Mike Woodson, before games, after games, in between games. You got to understand, right now, the floor for the Indiana Hoosiers is being a 21-win basketball team that makes the NCAA tournament and wins a first four game and makes it to Saturday in the Big Ten tournament. That's the floor. Mike Woodson has reiterated time and time again that it's just the beginning. And he has constantly talked about the idea of competing at the top of the Big Ten, competing well into the NCAA basketball tournament. And that's exactly what his aspirations are here. As a reminder, folks, the Hoosiers roster now is all but set going into this upcoming year. All 13 scholarship spots as of this moment are filled. Personally, I would be surprised if there were any more changes before opening night in November 2022. Your roster is Xavier Johnson, Miller Kopp, Race Thompson, Trayce Jackson-Davis, Trey Galloway, Jordan Geronimo, Anthony Leal, Tamar Bates, Logan Duncombe, Caleb Banks, CJ Gunn, Jalen Hood-Schifino, and Malik Renault. Combination, as you said, Mike, of experienced players, of younger players. And the reason I think it's very much achievable, realistic, to have this team go from unranked into a top 4 Big Ten team, a potential Big Ten title contender, potential Sweet 16 Elite Eight type team in the NCAA tournament, is because that's how college basketball is nowadays. Because of the transfer portal and because of recruiting and because of the amount of film available and because of the 35-game season and because of all the crazy circumstances that you deal with, it's pretty quick to turn things around. You don't need a 4-year runway. You don't need a throwaway season mixed in there. You don't need any of that. And especially with the Big Ten being as flimsy as it is, when you compare it to the rest of college basketball, I don't think there's any question that the Hoosiers can absolutely make this kind of splash as far as being a top tier Big Ten team, as far as contending into the second or third. That's right. There are 3 weekends in the NCAA tournament. That's exactly the kind of thing I can expect for the Hoosiers this year. But Mike,
if you look at last year, just to say real quick, if you look at last year, I mean, we had a pretty solid overall team. Our main problem, I think, from my view, was the 3-point shooting and perimeter play. And that's why I'm really interested in CJ Gunn to see what he can provide. But we have a lot of really good incoming players. I also think Jordan Geronimo has a really big potential to improve a lot and become, really a mainstay player. So I'm interested in his development. But I'm curious, Nathan, have you been in the film room? Have you been watching tape on some of these high school guys? Who are you most excited to see put on the IU jersey next year?
Look, everyone knows about Jalen Hood-Schifino and Malik Renault. Those guys will help, and Jalen Hood-Schifino can do 100 different things on the court. Caleb Banks is, to me, the player I am most excited about in this upcoming class. He's a 6'8" forward, that wing, big-ish wing prototype. I want to see someone with that wingspan out, switching among the different guards and the forwards are out there on the perimeter. He's a 4-star forward. He's the 3rd ranked recruit out of the 4 coming in. But if you ask me, Banks is someone that I could see step in. It's great for Banks himself that he'll have Miller Kopp there to provide that tutelage with Kopp's experience playing that position. So I'm looking forward to seeing that happening. Caleb Banks, look, he may not get all the minutes in year 1, but that's a premium position. And I'm looking forward to seeing Banks make a splash here in Bloomington over his Hoosiers career. Now, folks, look, Indiana's got Arizona and Kansas already reportedly scheduled in the non-conference season. Kansas has been confirmed. No question about that. The Arizona game was reported by John Rothstein. No one's refuted it. Indiana officially has not announced that game on the schedule, but we can, for now, assume that game will 100% be taking place. Arizona is in Las Vegas on December 10th. Kansas is in Lawrence on December 17th. Mike, there's a potential for North Carolina to visit Assembly Hall in the Big Ten ACC Challenge, and even the Hoosiers heading to Villanova in the Gavitt games. Now, those 2 pairings have not been announced yet. We could be completely wrong. We'll keep an eye out for that news to come through. Over the next few weeks, the Big East announced their pairings in the Big East Big 12 Challenge. So as the summer continues here, you'll start seeing some of these matchups announced. Look, Mike, it's obviously going to be a newer team with some new pieces, but the exciting part to me, and let me know if you agree, is that Indiana will get opportunities against great teams to serve as a measuring test before the conference play starts. That's how I look at it. Do you see it the same way?
Exactly. That's what you want. You want to have these marquee matchups in the non-conference season. Preferably, if you win, you get marquee games on your resume, going into the NCAA tournament that could help you secure a better seed. But even if you lose, like you said, you're facing top talented teams, great coaches. We know we're facing Kansas, likely Arizona. Those are 2 teams that have had success last year in the tournament, have good coaches, great players,
good returning rosters, both top 20 teams.
Exactly. If we face, Georgetown or Villanova, depending on who we play in the East, in the Gavitt games, that could be a really important game because we're facing a different style of play because both those teams have, a different approach to the game. And that's just as important, facing different styles, different types of teams, so that when you come to the NCAA tournament, you've seen everything, you know what to expect, and it's less of an adjustment. And so everything from your strength of schedule, players playing on national televised games against big time opponents to preparing for the NCAA tournament. It's all wins in my book whenever you play good non-conference teams. We know we're going to have a good, well, hopefully a good conference schedule. Looks like at least a few Big Ten teams are going to be good. But having those non-conference games is definitely a bonus, and it's going to help us, come spring.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see how that all plays out. So much to dive into here. We're just getting started on this episode of the Hoosier Sound. Trayce Jackson-Davis is back. We're going to be talking about NIL here in just a moment, some more social media action. But first, it's time for Who Won the Week over the last week or two in IU sports. And we'd be remiss if we did not mention Indiana linebacker Micah McFadden getting selected in the 5th round to the New York Giants in the NFL draft. And since then, he's been able to get onto the practice field with the Giants. He's the 9th straight year. It's the 9th straight year that a Hoosier has been picked in the NFL draft process. We saw that Ty Freifogel and Peyton Hendershot signed off undrafted deals with the Dallas Cowboys. Ryder Anderson joined McFadden with the Giants. Raheem Lane, Caleb Jones, Marcelino McCrary, all signed on as well. So I can't wait to see the Hoosiers make a splash in the NFL. Micah McFadden may not start for the Giants coming out of the preseason, but I absolutely believe he'll have a shot on the 53-man roster. And to get valuable snaps in that defense, the Giants added a new defensive coordinator this offseason, bringing in Don Martindale from the Ravens. It's a coordinator that loves blitzing. And Hoosier fans, you all know that Micah McFadden is an outstanding pass rusher out of that linebacker position. So I'm looking forward to seeing him record a few sacks in year one. Don't be surprised if you see him taking down quarterbacks in the NFC East or across the NFL here this upcoming season. I think he will absolutely make an impact for the Giants starting from year one. So I can't wait to see that all play out. If you'd like to
I was just going to say, I just wanted to jump in super quick. I just want to say I'm really interested to see a lot of these guys in the preseason and training camp and see, someone like Hendershot, I think, going to the Cowboys. I mean, that's a really nice fit. They love pass catching tight ends, the physicality. I think that's a good fit. Are there any other of those guys on that list you mentioned that you're keeping your eye on that could potentially surprise?
I absolutely love Ryder Anderson. I thought he made a really big impact in year one in his only year in Bloomington as a pass rusher. Freifogel has had that unbelievable 2020 season. It's going to be tough for him to break through in Dallas, if you ask me, with how many great receivers they have. But of course, we know the talent is there with Ty Freifogel. But, with Ryder Anderson, to me, especially in the Giants defense with the pass rush being so focused on there, I'm really looking forward to seeing him and McFadden and Hendershot, like you mentioned, in Dallas, do big things. If you would like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at IndianaHQ and at the Hoosier Sound. And remember, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. That kind of support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. So yes, folks, Trayce Jackson-Davis is back. Indiana's handicapped right now as far as a top 20 preseason team. It's going to be really exciting to see where the Hoosiers do stack up in the first preseason AP poll. But of course, that's not going to be released for another 5 months or so. So we're just going to have to hang tight. But Mike, I know you are fully aware of Trayce Jackson-Davis's NIL deals and how much that is becoming a larger and larger factor in players' decisions to either return to school or stay in the draft. Now, if Jackson-Davis didn't have NIL, do you think that would have kept him in the draft conversation or in the NBA selection process? Or do you think at the end of the day, outside of his NIL deals, he would have come back to Indiana for another year?
I mean, that's a really good question. I think that's tough to tell. I think Jackson-Davis, though, is a little bit of a different kind of situation because, as we mentioned, he really loves the IU brand. He loves being, in Bloomington and playing for the team. And he really does cherish the legacy of being a Hoosier. And also, he does have some stuff that he could work on to improve for the NBA. So it's also a little different because Jackson Davis, while he's got NIL deals with Merchants Bank and Pennzoil, he works with Hoosiers for Good, that we know is going to continue to do a lot of work for IU players. He's also represented in NIL by Excel Sports Management, one of the top agencies for basketball and sports in the world. Jeff Swartz, popular agent, is among their agents. They represent a ton of NBA players. So we know he's got the infrastructure to secure NIL deals. But it's also a little interesting because his Instagram followers is about 53.4 thousand, which sounds like a lot. But for example, Caleb Love has over 300,000. The Cavender twins, they have 4 million followers on TikTok and 260,000 on Instagram. You look at John Juzang, who's got, almost triple what Jackson Davis does. So it's difficult because we don't really know how much Jackson Davis is making in NIL. But it's also because you have to factor in the brand. IU's brand is not necessarily making money on social media. It's print advertisements. It's, things like the Merchants Bank deal. So it's difficult because we don't know how much is actually pulling in. But for example, we know Oscar Tshiebwe from Kentucky is rumored to be making $2 million next year in NIL. So it's really interesting to see what some of these players are pulling in. Master P, the rapper, his son is rumored to be making between 1 and 2 million. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. And so I think that does play a small part. But I think Jackson Davis is a bit of a unique scenario. Now, I just also want to mention, when we're comparing NIL to NBA, just to give a little background.
Yeah.
So the basic salary, the minimum salary for an NBA player is about 925,000, give or take, depending on the salary cap. Okay, if you're a two-way contract player, you're making about half of that. So over 400,000. If you're a G League player, your minimum is 37,000. But if you sign a 10-day contract, it's prorated based on the games you play. So if you sign 1 or 2 10-day contracts, you're doubling, tripling that 37,000. So it's difficult to say if he were to go to the NBA, he could be, if he gets drafted, maybe he makes over $1 million, could make the league minimum, could make half of that. Or if he's in the G League, he makes substantially less. But you look at someone like Mac McClung, who struggled a little bit in the beginning, but found his footing and ended up with a year guaranteed contract from the Lakers. And there's rumors that he might resign. So there's a lot of potential to maximize your salary in the NBA, even if you end up in the G League or a two-way contract. So it's difficult to tell, would you make money in the NBA, more money in the NBA or in NIL? Yeah. If you're someone like Oscar Tshiebwe, $2 million sounds pretty good.
Especially for Tshiebwe, who doesn't project right now to be a significant NBA superstar, nothing like that, so you'll take that. And of course, as you talked about legacy, you talked about upside. Tshiebwe, of course, in his one season at Kentucky, lost in the round of 64 to St. Peter's. He's going to try to re-script a better story here in year 2. Of course, the slight wrinkle there is that NIL deals, I'm under the impression that NIL deals signed in the spring semester do not restrict you from earning that money, even if you choose to go pro. So, there is that wrinkle there. But of course, at the end of the day, Jackson Davis did decide that what was best for him and his career prospects was to return for another year and play for the Indiana Hoosiers and coach Mike Woodson, who made it very clear when he took the job that step one in his coaching tenure at Indiana was getting Jackson Davis to stay. That was after Archie Miller was let go and Woodson came on. He said, I've got to get Jackson Davis here. If I keep him here, everything else will fall into place a little bit more easily. And now Jackson-Davis has gotten another year here with Coach Woodson. We talk about social media a lot here with the NIL piece. There was a lot of instant reaction from Hoosier coaches and teammates alike after Jackson-Davis announced his return to the Hoosiers on Friday afternoon. Indiana assistant Yasir Roseman was right on it. He must have been ready for this announcement, posting, a legacy, posting his famous baby picture after Indiana gets a commitment or some great news. Xavier Johnson used the brand spanking new tears welling up in your eyes emoji to convey his excitement that Jackson-Davis is coming back. Miller Kopp said it pretty perfectly. Just, he's ready to go here with Jackson-Davis returning, as he thinks Indiana is going to be a problem. I thought it was interesting. John Rothstein, he pointed out that in his early prediction for IU starting five, it's going to comprise of Xavier Johnson, no surprise, Race Thompson, no surprise, Trayce Jackson-Davis, but also Tamar Bates and Jalen Hood-Schifino. So that's what John Rothstein thinks. He has Indiana superstar, five-star recruit from Montverde in the starting five as things stand. Of course, it's an early prediction. These things will all play themselves out here over the course of the next handful of months. But as we mentioned earlier, Indiana's roster pretty much set in stone. I'm looking forward to seeing the kind of teacher Trayce Jackson-Davis can be to Malik Renault, with a very similar physical skill set, slightly different game, but there's a lot of similarity, a lot of parallels there between Jackson-Davis and Renault. And Jackson-Davis can be sort of that mentor versus mentee type of relationship with Renault in year one. At the end of the day, think that if Jackson-Davis can develop that mid-range jump shot, hit the occasional corner three, be a little bit more flexible on defense, that is really the bridge between him and a pretty successful NBA career. No one's going to tab him to be an MVP candidate or anything like that. But as far as someone who's getting picked in the first round, someone who's going to play a handful of seasons in the league, I think that's the game plan now for Jackson-Davis. Mike, if there's one thing you could pick for him, would it be the jump shot? Would it be the right hand in the post? Would it be something else, another aspect of his game? I know you talked about the defense. If you could pick one, what would the one skill be that you would like Jackson-Davis to perfect this upcoming year?
I think I'd say the jump shot.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a very small 12-foot or like a Dirk Nowitzki, Luka, one-legged little jump shot. Just something where, you could expand, make the defense guard you further out so that it opens up the lane for drives and passes. He is a pretty good passer. That's something that, people often overlook about his game. And so adding that jump shot, making the defense more honest, is only going to help with that. And also another thing that I think is going to be an important part of this year is continuing the evolution of his pick and roll skills, because that's something that he's going to need to have in the NBA. I think we're going to see more of that. He's very good at it. And I think the more that kind of becomes, more in the rotation, it's going to help his draft stock. And so having that jumper, combined with the pick and roll ability is just going to continue to move him toward the top of, the Hoosier roster or the Big Ten, and, potentially moving him up in the draft stock. And more NIL deals.
And of course, priceless memories with him and the Hoosier Nation here going into next year. Yeah.
And let's also remember that Mike Woodson's had a lot of success in the NBA with big guys. Yeah. That was his forte. He knows what they need to do in the NBA. He knows how to coach them up. And so I think he's going to continue to instill a lot of that wisdom into Jackson-Davis, and that's only going to help him moving forward.
Yeah, and it's also made an impact in Jackson-Davis's first year with Woodson. I thought the two areas where you saw Jackson-Davis take a large leap was in shot blocking and in passing. Jackson-Davis wasn't just affecting shots, he was blocking them, keeping them in play a lot of times to parlay into offensive opportunities. And I think that's exactly if you can pinpoint one or two things to adjust this upcoming year, all of a sudden now you really do have a first round prospect on your hands. Woodson gained a lot of praise for his work with Julius Randle in his final year with the Knicks before Woodson took the job at Indiana. This leads us to our podcast poll, which we did announce on the Hoosier Sound on Twitter earlier on Friday. Over 100 votes have come in already. Make sure you vote if you haven't yet. If there's one skill you would have Trayce Jackson-Davis refine, perfect before next year's NBA draft, which one would it be? No surprise, 89% of you do say, hey, get that mid-range jumper, hit that corner three. No one's asking Jackson-Davis to turn into Steph Curry or James Harden or anything like that. I think a reasonable goal here overall, 3 to 4 jump shots a game just to, get the defense off his scent as far as that elite post game that he has. The second highest selection coming in at 8% is Jackson-Davis to get that stronger right hand inside. So yeah, being able to finish over both shoulders, I think would be really a big help for Jackson-Davis. I also know that if he had kept his name in the draft for this upcoming summer, he would have basically gotten a lot of credit. He would have gotten a lot of hype for his ability to catch those lobs at the rim, just like you mentioned, Mike, with the pick and roll. And if he can get better at that, I think that'd be a great sign for the Hoosiers. We did have a couple of comments here at NYCWRB in the poll said mid-range and three. Of course, finishing with both hands there. Nat Finn says he'd sacrifice the mid-range completely for the three, for more proficiency at the 5 spots. So, of course, you can have that conversation about the value of the mid-range jumper. I think there's a lot there with Jackson-Davis. He can nail down a couple. I will say, having been at a ton of IU games in Jackson-Davis's career as a reporter for Indiana HQ, during shoot-around, the jump shot is there. It looks clean. It looks productive. It goes in. But at the mid-range level, straight away from the wings, from the corners, let's keep the half-court shot out of it. But the shooting form, that kind of ability looks like it is there. And so we'll see what happens as far as Jackson-Davis is concerned.
For sure. And I think the mid-range is much more plausible than shooting the three consistently. Maybe he'll take a couple, but I'd much rather see just a consistent, ability to make that 12, 15-foot jump shot. I think that would be enough to really propel him forward. And the three can always come later. Like if you look at someone like Grant Williams now for the Celtics, he didn't really have much of a three, in college.
Tennessee,
and now
right,
he's able to make them. I'd much rather expand slowly. Like you said, just take a couple per game, just enough to, keep the defense honest, wet your whistle a little bit, knock down a couple of days. I'd much rather, I think that's a better realistic ask for Jackson-Davis moving forward. And I know the mid-range is out of style. I love the three, but, sometimes you got to do what's the most efficient for you personally, not necessarily what's the most efficient jump shot. We know the threes are the analytical preference.
Right.
But if you look at someone like DeMar DeRozan, the mid-range can be pretty effective. So if we can just get a couple of those knocked down per game here and there, I think that'll be enough to help them, and it'll help them expand his post game as well.
Absolutely. And last year, Jackson-Davis finished the season at 18 points a game, 8 rebounds, 2.3 blocks. But of course, he had that huge flourish at the end of the season with 24 against Michigan in that Thursday conference tournament game that I know IU fans won't forget for a long time. 21 against Illinois, 31-10 against Iowa, 29-9 against Wyoming, and then a bit of a dud against St. Mary's, like all of the Hoosiers had against the Gales. So I think if you look ahead this upcoming year, a little 20-point, 9 rebound, 2.5 block per game season could be in the cards for TJD. Can't wait to see how it all plays out. Let us know what you think, Hoosier fans. Hit us up in the comments, hit us up in the live chat here, or of course on social media, Twitter and Instagram, you name it. Let us know your thoughts as Indiana looks like they will be a legitimate threat in the Big Ten this upcoming season. It's time for a social media shout out here. We'll wrap up with a little bit more on NIL here, especially in the world of football, which has gotten a little crazy. But as far as the social media shout out is concerned, there were a number of IU soccer alumni, baseball and softball players currently that we served to get the tip of the cap over the course of the last couple of weeks. How about Roman Celentano, the goalkeeper for FC Cincinnati, with back-to-back clean sheets? Pat Noonan was his coach at Cincinnati. He was part of the MLS Team of the Week in the preceding weekend. Victor Becerra made his MLS debut for the Chicago Fire. Carter Math. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. What's up, Mike?
Bazooka Becerra.
That's right. That's right.
By the way, listen, did you see Roman Celentano played in Soldier Field against the Chicago Fire? He was an Illinois native soccer FC, program, here in Illinois. I want to say he's from Naperville, but did you see Roman Celentano? He had an enormous fan section at Soldier Field. They commented it on the broadcast. There was a row of fans, all in Roman Celentano jerseys, lined up. I'm telling you, it was at least 12, maybe 20 family and friends lined up, cheering extremely loud. I thought it was great to see. Shout out to him and the rest of the Hoosier going pro.
Absolutely. And I had heard some comments about that. I didn't dig into it too deeply, but it's no surprise here. Celentano was a bit of a fan favorite in Indiana as well. Current Hoosier baseball player Carter Matheson set a freshman record for home runs, topping Alex Dickerson's number in 2009. Cora Bassett in the softball program set a team record for doubles in a season. And of course, our good friend Jevin McCoskey, who's a regular contributor here on Indiana HQ, he grabbed a full-time job with WTHI in Terre Haute upon his graduation last week, a couple of weeks ago, I should say. Great to see all the Hoosiers graduating here after a crazy college experience. Looking forward to seeing what everyone does in the real world. All right, look. That's right. Exactly. Shout out to Jevin. On social media, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Indiana HQ or at the Hoosier Sound. On Instagram, we're not Indiana HQ, but we're Indiana.HQ. So you can find us there. Follow us if you haven't already. Become the newest one among the hundreds and thousands to have followed us on social media. We'll be your one-stop shop for IU sports. Keep you plugged in for any big news happening in the offseason.
And don't forget, listen. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Always share, like everything. It's all big, and you can be the most educated IU fan in the room. Mike, quick wrap up here. All right, couple minutes, but I would be crazy if I had you on this podcast and did not mention the ridiculous tiff, the tangle that Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher got into the last couple of days as far as NIL and the weird, slimy, shady type of business happening right now with players right out of high school getting paid to seemingly commit and spend their student athlete careers at a specific school. We're going to dig in too much in the SEC stuff. But Mike, I know how familiar you are with NIL stuff. Is what you're seeing right now aligned with sort of the original intent of NIL? And frankly, does any of it matter?
Well, first off, this feud was electric. I haven't seen something like this in so long. Two coaches going directly at each other, calling each other out. I mean, name calling, insults. I mean, it was great. You hardly ever see this. Usually it's passive aggressive, but this was direct. They call each other. I don't know if you saw Jimbo Fisher's comment, but when Saban called him out for paying players, Jimbo Fisher said that was a lie and he would never lie, he would never cheat, and that if he did, he learned when he was young that his dad said if he lied and cheat, he'd slap him across the head. And he actually said maybe Saban needs to be slapped across the head, which was an incredible comment, very surprising to hear from professional coaches. But yeah, I think this is the world we live in now. I think if you look at the recruiting rankings for football, Texas A&M nabbing massive recruits over and over. I think Alabama was kind of stunned, maybe a little potentially threatened that someone's a little bit on their corner. But, it's Alabama. They're going to be good. They don't need to worry. But I think it kind of took Saban by surprise that someone like Texas A&M, with their powerful alumni and all that oil money, was able to secure these NIL deals. And it also, Saban went after Deion Sanders in Jackson State. So, who has some pretty extensive deals. Travis Hunter got $1 million NIL deal. Deion Sanders obviously working with Barstool Sports as well. So, it's really interesting to see what's happening. And there's really not a lot of regulation, which I think is both good and bad. We don't really know. There's some states that have laws, some states don't. The NCAA says a school can't directly pay players. They can't directly approach companies to have them pay players, but there's no real enforcement mechanism if they do. There's also ways to get around it. For example, I saw Purdue had a job posting for an NIL director of engagement, and they said that they're working with the Aspire group, and the Aspire group is helping them with fan engagement and helping athletes with NIL deals. So essentially, they're working through the Aspire group to help the university secure deals. And so, or rather, excuse me, to help the players of the university secure deals. So it's a lot of, well, what exactly is going on? I think it's a bit exaggerated for Saban to say, hey, this player, this university is paying players. That's not really what's going on. It's more of the alumni. It's the companies that are fans of the school. The universities aren't directly paying them. But with that being said, we don't really know if the universities are directly paying them. It could be happening, or it could not be. And even if it did, nothing would probably happen because we don't have an enforcement mechanism. But at the end of the day, does it really matter? I think was your question. No, I don't think it does. Because at the end of the day, what schools are getting the top recruits? Texas A&M, Alabama,
good schools that have
University
historically
of
been.
Miami.
Yeah.
The majority of these NIL deals are going to the dominant programs anyway. It's just shifting the power balance.
Georgia, LSU, Florida, Clemson, the same deal.
USC,
Notre Dame.
USC just got, top
Jordan
coach.
Addison. Yeah, Jordan Addison,
receiver,
and as well as Lincoln Riley, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think there's certainly exceptions to the rule, like the Cavender twins going to Miami women's basketball, or Travis Hunter going to Jackson State. But in the end, it's a lot of the same programs. And I think Notre Dame basketball coach Mike Bray said it best. This is why we all love him. He said, let's just stop complaining. Coaches complain too much. We get paid a lot, but we complain a lot. Let's just get back to coaching. This is what's happening. This is the environment. We just got to learn to live with it. And I think that's what's going to happen moving forward.
Yeah, I think the pros have outweighed the cons so far. As crazy as that might sound to some of
Absolutely.
you, for the players to get a slice of the payoff of their hard work and how much value they bring to these different universities that they're at. So to me, so far, pros have outweighed the cons since last July.
Well, and also you got to think about what's the point of college, right? We want to be a teaching moment. What's a better teaching moment than giving these players, potentially pay for their hard work, teaching them financial literacy, how
Absolutely.
to deal with money, how to, do these kind of things, how to be entrepreneurial. And it's also important to remember that, like, for example, the Saban comment, he's talking directly about college football, but name, image, and likeness impacts all the other sports. A lot of them that don't often get talked about, the women's volleyball player, the men's lacrosse player, the swimmer. If you look at the social media, highest social media followers for college athletes, there's players from all different sports, male and female. it impacts so many people. So you can't just have a micro view of, okay, we're talking about SEC football or Big Ten basketball, because it impacts so many different people, so many different players, genders, races. So it's great to see what's happening. Maybe there might be a couple tweaks needed, but overall, I think, like you said, it's a net positive.
Yeah, I totally see that there. To me, the one big fix, if the NCAA president and the different head coaches are really bothered about this, get a college football commissioner, get a college basketball commissioner, so that individual conferences don't have to make individual determinations. Let's all play by the same rules. Mike, as we wind down here on this Friday night, let's kick off our weekend here. Any closing thoughts from your end as far as Trayce Jackson-Davis's return? Anything as far as NIL commentary, whether it's on IU basketball or in general? Of course, we talked about a large number of pros doing great things right now. We didn't even mention Ali Patberg getting named team and recruiting coordinator for Indiana women's basketball. We didn't even mention Victor Oladipo getting into the Eastern Conference Finals for the Heat and having an electric fourth quarter in Miami's Game 2 loss. We did not mention Juwan Morgan getting on the board here this postseason for Boston as far as scoring there. That was exciting. Any closing thoughts on your end here as we wind down on Friday night?
Well, I think it's just a really exciting time. If you're an IU sports fan, Trayce Jackson-Davis returning, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the program looks like moving forward. I think that's a big, huge help to the program. And in terms of NIL, I think we're going to see him securing more and more deals, as well as the rest of the basketball team. The Hoosiers for Good program, as well as, the current infrastructure. I think IU's been on top of it and being open to NIL, which is good. That's only going to help us moving forward. I'm excited about Jordan Hulls joining the staff, a fan favorite. And I think it's always good when you could kind of have those guys return to the program. Speaks volumes about the love that these players have for the program and how they can instill that wisdom onto other players. Also, like you said, looking at the football players, who are securing, spots in training camp or, getting drafted or having opportunities. You look at the soccer players, IU has an incredible amount of soccer players in the MLS that really goes kind of untalked about, in the mainstream. And I think that's awesome that we're continuing to dominate there. So it's just a great overall time to be a Hoosier fan. And let's hope Oladipo and, some more of these guys can continue to look good in the playoffs and, continue to keep the ball rolling.
Absolutely. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned here, I've mentioned this on our podcast once or twice before. I've said this, and this is going to be on Trayce Jackson-Davis' return here. The Big Ten is kind of trash. Okay. Look, I know that there are great environments and great players have come through this league in the last few years. But by and large, when your best teams are getting knocked out in the first weekend of March Madness, I should say, I don't want to hear anymore about what the analytics say. I don't want to hear any more about what Joe Schmo on Big Ten Network says. The Big Ten Conference is up for grabs and it's up for domination. Okay. No one expected Baylor 5 years ago to become one of the elite teams in the Big 12 where they're regularly competing along with Kansas for that top spot. No one expected Duke to have such a strong hold on the ACC. I look at this right now, and it starts with this upcoming season where Indiana's been quiet. Indiana's had some tough times from a men's basketball standpoint. But much like Terry Morin has done on the women's side, as far as getting right up there with Maryland and becoming an elite force in the Big Ten, Mike Woodson can do the same exact thing as far as men's basketball is concerned. Okay, look, Jaden Ivey, he's gone. Travion Williams, he's gone. Keegan Murray, see ya. Johnny Davis, goodbye. These quality players in the Big Ten are out the door. And while that happens every year, look at the league. There's an opportunity there for Mike Woodson and the Indiana Hoosiers to consistently have a legitimate shot at winning this conference every year. They are capable, they are talented, they're competent enough to get there, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out. But with that said, that about wraps it up for our 253rd show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You're all beautiful people. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.